Hello, my friends around the world. How you guys doing? I'm wrapped in a bow because I'm sending you guys this present. It's called the Three Proofs in Buddhism. What is it? Theoretical proof, scriptural proof or written proof, what we call documentary proof, and actual proof. So this is what Nichiren, and probably before Nichiren, I don't know who came up with the three proofs, but he talked a lot about those. Why Nichiren's his form of Buddhism, which was based on the final teachings of Buddhism, which is the Lotus Sutra, was the greatest teaching and the only teaching supposed to be practiced in the latter day of the law, which he believed he was born into, and we are still in now. So let's just go. I'm going to go in a different order than I just said it, but scriptural proof. If you go through the scriptural proof, which if you read all the how many thousands of pages of Nichiren's writings, he goes through all the scriptural proof of why the Lotus Sutra is the final teaching of Buddhism. Not only does it say it in the Lotus Sutra, but it says it in sutras before the Lotus Sutra, and it says it in sutras after the Lotus Sutra. And that was debated throughout China by Tiantai, and he became called Tiantai the Great because he won all the debates throughout China that he debated about the superiority of the Lotus Sutra. And that was, I don't know how many, I forget when Tiantai lived. But then when Buddhism went to Japan, it was Dengyo, who was also called Shi'i, I think, or was that Tiantai that was called Shi'i? I always forget that one. But anyway, Dengyo and Tiantai were their honorific names. Tiantai the Great and Dengyo the Great. And the reason Dengyo became, or was called Dengyo the Great, is because he also, throughout Japan, he debated other religious scholars at all the temples, and he debated that the Lotus Sutra was the final teaching of Buddhism, and it was the only teaching that should be practiced in the latter day of the law, because that's what it says in the Lotus Sutra, that's what the historical Buddha said. So he won all the debates, and they eventually called him Dengyo the Great, and formed a huge monastery on top of Mount Hiei in Kyoto, where the center of Buddhism became the center of Buddhism after it was in Nara before that. So then when Nichiren was born in 1222, he wanted to also prove that, or he wanted to find why the people were suffering in Japan. So he studied all the sutras, and he came to the same conclusion Dengyo came to and Tiantai came to, that the Lotus Sutra was the only sutra that was meant to be practiced in the latter day of the law. And because all the people were practicing other sutras, that the people were suffering in Japan so intensely during that time, and if they would only go back to the historical Buddha's teachings that are in all the sutras, and it goes in a line all the way to the Buddhism of the latter day of the law, which is the Lotus Sutra, and they practiced the Lotus Sutra, and they stopped putting other sutras above the Lotus Sutra in their thinking and in their worship and practice, then Japan wouldn't be suffering all the sufferings that it was suffering. Anyway, we can go on and on about that. I have other videos on YouTube about that. But that was the documentary proof. Theoretically, you can read all about the Lotus Sutra, all about the final teachings of Buddhism, all about Nichiren's writings. We debate them all the time in the World Tribune, weekly newspaper, in the Living Buddhism magazine. It's a monthly magazine. There you go. We study all the teachings. We have open introductions to Buddhism. I went to one last night where people come and ask questions, and we always talk about openly. We love when you come and ask questions, because the theories and the principles of Buddhism make complete sense to everyone who studies them, and that's the theoretical proof that it makes total sense in context of everything that is now known and everything that will be known in the future and everything that was known in the past. It makes complete sense. And then the final one is actual proof. So I've introduced many people to Buddhism, and I was explaining to this one guy last night who came to the introduction meeting. He said, well, I'm not really into Buddhism, and I'm not really into this. The only reason I came to the meeting is because the really nice people at the hospital I was interning at invited me to come, and I thought they were really nice people, and I wanted to be gracious and just go, okay, I'll come check it out, even though I'm not really interested in Buddhism. So he said, I'm glad you guys invited me. I really enjoyed your chanting and everything like that, but I'm just not interested in it. I said, okay. So I introduced him to this idea that everyone I've ever introduced to it had their life drastically changed. So I said, why don't you just experiment? And I've had even people who decided to try to prove it wrong. And I said, that's great. And I've known people in the organization that started Buddhism that way. They wanted to prove their husband wrong, their wife wrong, their boyfriend wrong, their girlfriend wrong, their mom, their sister, their brother, who said, "You come on, just try it out." They wanted to prove them wrong, so they said, "Okay, I'm going to try it out for a month, and I'm just going to do this weird thing you guys do, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho." You chant every morning. I'm going to try to read this crazy book called Gongyo, Myoho Renge Kyo, all that stuff. I'm going to do that in the morning. I did it wrong. I've been doing it all my life. Anyway, you can hear me doing it on my other videos. I do it where you can do it slow and fast. Anyway, it's easy to learn, but it takes a little while. So he did that. I've had lots of people do this, and they try it for a month just to prove the person wrong. My life's not going to change, whatever. And then all of a sudden they just like, wow, things start clicking in their life. Their boss starts treating them better, they start getting a raise at work, or they start getting better sales if they're in sales, or they find a girlfriend or boyfriend or significant other, or they break up with their significant other, which they've always wanted to do but they never had the courage, stuff like that. But drastic changes happen without even them focusing on the outcome of that drastic change, even though we usually tell them, put down like 4 or 5 things you think are impossible in your life and see if something moves in that direction. And usually the impossible is what you need to go after to prove that Buddhism, this form of Buddhism, because if you study it, it makes documentary proof. It has documentary proof. It has theoretical proof. So what you got to do is just try it out. I'm an international healer. I have clients around the world. When I was in Japan, I had a lot more clients in other countries than Japan. I had a few in Japan. I came to the U.S. I've been working a lot more on other jobs, so I haven't been focusing as much on my healing because I don't have like a healing place I had like I did in Japan where I can really concentrate on it, which was above my house. I had a little healing center. I don't have yet that place. I live in a 1-room apartment because I'm paying 5 times more than my 2-story house in Japan for a 1-room apartment in San Diego. So I'm just now expanding my life to where I can afford something bigger and have a healing center. Maybe I'll do healing full-time after I get over doing car sales full-time. But I'm doing pretty good in car sales for the fact that I've only been in like 6 months in the business. Because that's my actual proof that I'm breaking through my financial karma. And this word karma in the final teachings of Buddhism is actually a positive term. It's the creation of fortune through good causes and the eradication of past causes that were not as good as they should have been, and clearing them out so that you don't have to suffer any consequences you think you have to suffer based on things you didn't think you did right in the past, which you didn't really do anything wrong because you've always been right and you've always been good because you're listening to this video this long, so you must be amazing. Okay, but anyway, that's a whole nother theory of mine, and I don't want to go into it. So thank you for listening, and why don't you try it out? Oh, I was going to say, the reason I said I'm an international healer is because I have clients who I've worked on for a while, and I've told them after a while, like, I've worked on you too long. You should have already overcame all the shit that you came to me to overcome. And most of my clients have overcome them all, and you're too slow, so I don't want to work on you anymore unless you also add into the healing sessions chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo or going to Buddhist meetings. And I make them do that, or I won't continue doing healing on them because I know there's only so much I can do with the healing if they're not willing to change their life drastically through experimenting in something they've never done, which is chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo and practicing Buddhism and studying Buddhism. So I finally just get tired of working on people if I've worked with them too long and they're not. If I'm working with them for a long time and they're seeing drastic changes, then I'll keep working with them. But if they're complaining they're not getting enough changes, and I'm saying, well, then I'm gonna have to throw it back in the ball in your court. You're gonna have to do something like chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo to see the drastic change, so that the work I'm doing will start taking off to where you want it to take off to. Eventually, I'm hoping I don't need to do healing on them anymore. They can just chant and do Gongyo and go to Buddhist meetings and then be happy there ever after, like I am and everyone else that I've ever introduced to Buddhism that continued. Of course, a lot of people I've introduced to Buddhism didn't continue, and that's because it is very difficult to continue in Buddhism. They always say it's easy to accept and very difficult to continue. The reason that is because you have a lot of shit in your life, and when you start really bringing it out so you can change it, it gets scary sometimes. You have to deal with deep, dark demons that you didn't want to deal with, that are keeping you from being the infinite, amazing, orgasmic being you truly be from time without beginning into the infinite future, and having ease, joy, and glory in everything you do, which you should be doing, but because you have all this stuff that you, skeletons in the closet, you're not willing to deal with, they'll come out when you start practicing Buddhism, and then you have to deal with them. And you have to bust through them, because you are powerful and you can. And the greatest thing is, the more you chant, the more you overcome your karma, the bigger the obstacle will come, and the more powerful you will be to overcome that obstacle. So amazing, isn't it? Okay, so if you're ready, give it a try. Contact me. Add me on your friends on Facebook, on I'm the only Tim Janakis, don't knock us until you try us, on the internet that I've known of. There's another Janakis spelled Janakos. That's not Tim Janakis. A couple of them. But anyway, I'm the only Tim Janakis that I've seen yet. And if someone else becomes Tim Janakis, I'll have to fire them or change my name. No, I'm just joking. Anyway, I love you guys. Talk to you later. Let me know if you have any questions about Buddhism. Put it in the comments. And share, like, all that stuff you guys always do with all my other videos, because you guys are all amazing people, because you watch this long, and you've probably watched many of my other videos. All right, I love you all. Take care. Peace out.